Hello, everyone. Welcome to our woodland walk for the month of July. And we are joined today by Geoff Bathje. Thank you for joining us, Geoff.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I met Geoff many years ago at a conference and was really struck by his presentation, which was amazing. I think I went up to him afterwards and said, "Oh, I'm so inspired by your work." It was really just felt really a really fresh perspective. He's a psychologist. We're both psychologists. Geoff is a professor as well and a researcher and a drug policy reform advocate, and he's based in Chicago. And he is part of the Sana Healing Collective, which it sounds just so amazing, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about this. I'm going to read to you what Sana does and then hand over to Geoff to tell us a little bit more about his work and his journey. So, Sana provides ketamine-assisted therapy, support to individuals who use psychedelics, and holistic services to promote mental health. We are interested in facilitating healing at the individual, family, community, social, and systemic level. We understand humans in an ecological framework, and so we view the biological, psychological, social, and contextual layers of existence not as separate parts, but as one supersystem. We seek to work holistically in accordance with this perspective. And of course, those of us in the ASA community, this will resonate so much with us. Um, so yeah, over to you, Geoff. Thank you so much for being here. And please tell us a little bit. Maybe you could start off by telling us your journey to get here to where you are today.
Sure. And I think I give you an outdated bio. I'm a former professor like yourself. I left to do some different things. I left about 3 years ago. Once Sana really got going, I had about a year overlap between the two. But yeah, so how I came to it, I didn't have any thought of doing anything with psychedelics professionally when I went into psychology as a program of study. So I had kind of an always exposure to psychedelics. I grew up with hippie parents who were part of the 70s counterculture, and basically lived in a commune where there was a lot of psychedelic use. Not a formal commune, but just them and some friends who rented a big farmhouse and took Timothy Leary's dropout idea seriously, and so working as little as possible, and just always a lot of people around and enjoying life and that sort of thing. And so just there was never a time when I wasn't exposed to psychedelics. Didn't actually try them for the first time until I was maybe 19 or something, and thought it was really novel and interesting, but there wasn't any pathway to do anything career wise with them. So I might have enjoyed any hobby. It just kind of seemed like something interesting, but wasn't anything that I thought I would ever do anything with. Um, and then professionally, though, it really wasn't until I got into harm reduction uh, that I think got me considering the adaptive uses of drugs, and that kind of aligned with my own experience that people could use not just psychedelics but other substances in a way that was enjoyable and could be um, careless or have risks, or could not, so that you could mitigate some of those risks. And so I had seen all that from my own experience. So harm reduction just really made sense to me. And when I started running into that, I think in my master's program, running into the idea of ibogaine being used therapeutically to treat addiction, that kind of just piqued my interest. But still, I was already a professor by the time I started thinking, oh, maybe I should, do a research study with psychedelics. And only years later went and got a training and did a certificate program in psychedelic assisted therapy, and started working toward building this nonprofit organization with some colleagues. And when it started to just gradually become more and more of something that could be part of my career.
Hmm. So you've really, yeah, your own integration, your own kind of long-term psychedelic
Mm.
experience through your whole life. Your kind of integration
Yeah.
that is offering that out in a really grounded way to a whole community. And it sounds like I really want to hear more about Sana now, but it's a
Mhm.
place-based, it's a center in an actual physical place, serving
Yeah.
a community of people, and that's really inspiring to me that you've yes, I suppose you kind of grew up in a kind of commune where people were together, and it feels like you've kind of created something
Yeah, I'm full circle. Yeah.
Because it's place-based, but also with the experience of a psychologist and all the training that you've done and all the groundedness of everything you've brought in and the harm reduction. So that feels like a beautiful life path, really.
Yeah, and I've done other things like community organizing, and so community has been a very important thing to me before I ever ran into the discipline of community psychology, which if I'd known it existed, that probably would have been my degree. But nonetheless, I got a degree on the clinical side, and I'm a therapist, and that's worked well too. So those worlds kind of cross back and forth over each other. So community psychology kind of being the one that focuses on anything other than the individual. So more like how do we promote collective well-being? And so I kind of try to carry both those lenses, but it's also kind of swimming against the current, so to speak, where you know our culture does pretty much anything it can to prevent us from thinking about problems collectively, and especially about thinking of solutions collectively. So
Mm, yeah,
yeah.
so true. Can I ask, in terms of the life experience you had? I mean, that's such a profound thing to have grown up with. This a psychedelic commune. This is a very rare experience. Can I ask, in terms of what you learned, your biggest learnings from that? What did you come away with?
And I was young when I moved out, but I think the fact that I remember it so well says that something in me said this is important and held on to that. But then we're still kind of connected to that community of people for a number of years when I was younger. But we were actually only in that house for my first 3 years of life, and then a number of years beyond that, we're connected to that group of people, just living separately. And so, yeah, I don't know what I learned at the time, other than it's good to have a community of people around, and that feels at home. And it was kind of a rural area, where I moved to a city after that, and so I think I had these contrasts, and I also had these exposures to what I would call like these dual states of consciousness, where you're living in different places and different realities, that I think can make psychedelic use either appealing or at least comfortable to a degree. That when I find myself in one way of thinking, one way of seeing things for too long, I think I tend to desire to shake that up and make some change. So psychedelics were kind of a natural thing for me that way, but I think other substances can facilitate that too. I think travel or exposure to other cultures, even within your own country, can do that as well. So I think there are all these ways that we can kind of shake up our perspective and how we view things. And um, I'm just through my life experiences kind of prone to that. Whereas I think if you have different life experiences that might be kind of uncomfortable, and you might seek not to have those experiences, actually, depending on what your experience is with that type of change.
Mm,
Uh, so anyway, yeah, it's just all kind of based on what your own exposures are, though. It's not I don't view it as any special trait of my own. It's just my own life experiences. So,
mm. And it's reminds me of how you're talking about the community psychology and also traditional clinical psychology, holding both of those worlds at the same time, obviously
yeah.
very different. And I agree with you. If I'd known, well, I actually was taught a bit of community psychology in my
Oh,
PhD, and
yeah.
I loved it. And I just thought, why is this not, this needs to be everywhere. And I don't feel like it's really, I don't feel like in the years since then that I haven't had much. I mean, there's a whole community psychology kind of field, but I don't feel like it's expanded or influenced psychology as much as I really hoped it would, however many years ago
Yeah.
that I trained.
Yeah, no, I ended up teaching it. I got assigned to teach that my first year teaching, my first semester teaching, and it's kind of like, oh, I thought I had a lot of original ideas here, but there's a whole field that studies this stuff.
And can you tell us a bit about Sana then, and how do you bring, because I love what I read out about this understanding humans in an ecological framework and all these different layers. Um, how do you bring that into your work using ketamine-assisted psychotherapy and integration? How does that lens inform the day-to-day running of your collective?
Yeah, so there are a few things about how we're structured that I actually don't really ever get to talk about much, other than maybe in small conversations. If submitted to a few conferences to talk about, kind of the organizational model and doing things in a nonprofit approach and some of the neat things we're doing, but never get accepted to talk about that one. And so, I mean, we incorporated as a nonprofit around the goal of accessibility. So knowing that any new treatment, at least in the US, and I know our healthcare system is an anomaly globally, but in the US, any new cutting edge treatment takes about 20 years before it becomes universal. And when it came to psychedelic assisted therapy, we wanted that to be more accessible early on. And so we incorporated as a nonprofit so we could have other ways to raise funds other than just charging people for the service, and therefore to make it more accessible, from the start. And so in the US, ketamine is not coverable by insurance because it's an off-label use. And I know in some countries you can't do it at all. So maybe we're still more fortunate than a lot of places in that way. But the therapy can be covered that surrounds the ketamine administration. And so, yeah, so this allows us to make it more financially accessible to people. Some unique things about the organization too is that we've always we took a couple of years to set it up, working very part-time, just meeting monthly among our founders, and we worked out of a consensus model. And so any decisions we were making, we applied consensus decision making to that. We were non-hierarchical, so even though we need to have a like a director or a board president, for example, because the paperwork requires it. We don't view those as like superior roles to whatever other roles you might have in the organization, and working by consensus kind of flattens out the power that might come from needing to have somebody in one of those roles. And yeah, it's really the goal being that we don't need to standardize things. Every member of our organization has different gifts and brilliance and knowledge, and sort of kind of give them the autonomy to work in their own ways rather than trying to standardize how we work. That different of us will work best with different clients who come in, right? And so we work a little bit more like a worker-owned cooperative might work, even though there's no owner, and so no one to hold like a profit motive in how the place operates then. And yeah, we offer a number of things. It's not just therapy. We do consultation groups for people who are working with ketamine. We offer various trainings. You'll be doing our speaker series where we interview you about integration. Yeah, we do community organizing. So we've even before Sana started, we were doing community organizing around psychedelics and harm reduction, so people could come together and meet other people who use psychedelics, and that's kind of continued to be part of it. We do group work, so not just individual work. So I think part of getting beyond that intrapsychic individual way of thinking is getting people together in a group to do their work. And we do that including with ketamine. So we do group ketamine experiences. And then also various of us, it's not part of our paid work, but we do advocacy and policy work and get involved where we can to kind of shape things at that more structural level. But we're still small enough that we don't have somebody like in a policy role where they can be paid to do that. But yeah, we were involved with that before Sana and are still involved with that kind of stuff.
So you're doing so much. I really want to ask you about the group ketamine therapy. I have so many questions about that. I've never been able to,
Sure.
from a few retreats, I've never been able to work with psychedelic assisted therapy with groups in a kind of trial setting or a formal clinical setting. It's only been in retreat setting. And obviously it's so different. And I want to know everything. How many people? How do you decide if it's individual or group? What do you learn from group therapy? How is it different from individual therapy? Answer
Yeah,
any of
a
that.
lot of good questions there. So we'll start with how to decide if somebody's appropriate for it. So I think that's collaborative. When people make an inquiry to us, they can say if they're looking for group or individual. And so you're right. Maybe not everyone knows what that encompasses and what it's about. So I think part of it is just explaining the group format and process to people, and if that would be appealing to them. If importantly, if they feel like they can hold space for other people as well, or if they feel like they're going to kind of need to take up the whole room. if they've ever been in a group setting of any kind before, that can be helpful, but isn't a requirement. So, but yeah, we do have people in our groups where it's their first psychedelic experience, their first group experience. If we feel like maybe they're maybe in a good place for it, and that's can be a little bit subjective and can be a little bit about their own motivation and sense of readiness for that too. And so in the same way that we want to kind of encourage people to trust what comes up during their psychedelic experience, sometimes we'll call that the inner healing intelligence. We want to kind of trust if they're feeling called to be in a group format versus individual, or vice versa, that if they feel like they're not ready for that. But there's some room there to kind of challenge yourself too. I used to do groups for social anxiety, for example, and which is kind of counterintuitive, but it's so sometimes there is the value in, like, could this challenge you in a helpful way, not in a way that's counter to the things you're working on, but it can challenge you in a helpful way. And I think that's a good question to reflect on too, because it's normal to have some anxiety about being in a group setting. And so yeah, the size of the groups, I think the ratio is more important than the size to some extent. So two therapists, or sorry, two clients to each provider in the group. So we have two therapists and a prescriber for a 6-person group. So 1 to 2, 1 to 3, I think those are decent ratios for a group. I don't imagine we'd probably do a group larger than 8 or 9 people though, because then there's not enough time for everyone to participate, where they might have a lot of content both before and after the psychedelic experience. It's worth saying I do view ketamine as a psychedelic. I'm not so interested in like defining psychedelic by this one molecule, serotonin, or one specific serotonin receptor. I think it's more phenomenological. It's about the experience that people have. And so unquestionably, to me, ketamine produces psychedelic experience. And it's also unquestionable to me that you can have use of things like LSD and mushrooms that are absolutely non-psychedelic, like microdosing. And so I'm not so interested in just a molecule. I'm interested in an experience, which maybe not surprising as a psychologist versus somebody who's researching neurochemistry or something. But so I answered some of the questions there, but happy to delve in. Like, yeah, where would you like to dive into, like, how the process differs? Where would you like me to focus? Happy to talk about any angle of it.
Yeah, I guess like how it's so brave, isn't it, for people to do this in a group? Just thinking
Yeah.
about the experiences of people in the psilocybin for depression trial and how much it was for people just to open themselves up to, because you have no idea what's going to come up. You have no way of predicting. And even
Yeah.
if you've had experiences before, you have no way of knowing where you're going to go. And to do that in front of other people, your guides, is one thing. But to
Yeah.
do that in front of other people is so courageous and yet so incredibly important. So yeah, I'm just wondering about how how it tends to go. Obviously there's huge variation, but overall, um, how is it differing from the individual sessions you do, and what are people saying about their group sessions?
Mm.
Do some people find it traumatic because actually stuff comes up that they didn't want to go through in front of other people, or is that kind of rare? Again, I've asked you three
Yeah,
questions.
I haven't had anyone experience that as traumatic, and that might be part of the readiness question. And so I would say, like, trauma history is probably the number one reason why somebody would say they're not ready and they want to kind of try this in like a one-on-one setting first, or even we do co-therapy as well, so two therapists with them first. Uh, and so yeah, I would say though that being in the group format, you're right, it does require some courage to kind of sign up for that. And then once you're signed up, though, once you get started, it really can help right size the me in that experience. And so I think throughout the West, we carry this exaggerated, inflated ego and sense of self that is just puts us in conflict and competition with other people all the time. And so for a lot of people, I think it's once you actually get started and have that first preparation meeting, and we have several preparation meetings before we're ever doing a medicine experience together. it's kind of like you can kind of see the sense of relief in that, like, oh, I don't have to be the center of attention for this entire thing, and I can still benefit while not being the center of attention. And so I think that's a really valuable part of, whether a psychedelic group or not. But I think the fact that they're embarking on this novel experience together then becomes a powerful part of that too, and can create a sense of the collective pretty quickly. That you're not just getting together to see a concert, which can be fun and great, but you're having this extended shared experience that's going to take over 2 months or so to play out. And so we're definitely informed by some of what how retreats would be structured. The difference is, with retreats, they might provide some support on the front end. You go there, have this intense experience, and then whatever WhatsApp group or whatever they offer coming out of it, a lot of the time the follow-up might be kind of limited or separate. Like, everyone go connect with their own integration person when they get back home. And so it's nice to be able to do that whole thing in one place. I think that's a luxury versus the retreat setting, is that you really have the same container all the way through. And you have people who are local to you, so group members, I think, tend to stay connected when they are in the same area rather than coming from all over the world to a retreat center. And so it is still during the ketamine part of the experience inward focused, and anybody who's been to a psychedelic retreat is familiar with that. So you kind of have your own mat, your own space where you can lie down and have an inward experience. That doesn't mean it's entirely inward. Like, you're even when a group is relatively calm, you're kind of aware of other people in your surroundings. I wouldn't say that in a group setting, ketamine is any more like sedating though than any other psychedelic. I think the group picks up on each other's energy, and so when one person gets energetic, other people pick up on that, and or if they get outwardly expressive, other people pick up on that, and so it kind of raises the energy level of the group. And one of the most interesting things that happens that I see as like evidence of this kind of group energy is when people do ketamine individually, like an intermuscular shot, it's very reliably like a 45-minute long experience, the way we dose it. And we dose it the same way in a group, and it's very reliably a much longer experience, sometimes upwards of like hour 15, hour and a half. And yeah, I see that as kind of the energy of the set and setting, and people kind of playing off of each other and reading each other. But it's like sometimes we're struggling to kind of in the music, and a lot of people start winding down by like an hour and 15 into it, which is a half hour longer than if it was an individual experience. Yeah.
Do they go as deep? Is it that they go less deep for longer because of the group rather than 45? Is it like 45-minute solo deep dive and a 1 hour 15 shallower dive because the group is kind of keeping you present? Like, I was just thinking of ketamine as a quite very in the kind of deep ketamine dive, much less aware of your externalities potentially, I thought, although I might be wrong, than some other psychedelics.
Yeah. No, just totally hypothetical, and I don't even know how you could measure such a thing, but I would guess that 45 minutes is pretty similar, and I would guess like whatever amount of time afterwards when they're still inward is probably that's probably there. That's probably to some extent still there for them individually. It's not like it just stops and they've totally processed it by 45 minutes, but I think they feel able to talk, and they're aware they have the one-on-one attention, and so maybe they pop up a little bit sooner or want to make use of the talking time. Whereas in the group, but I think you're kind of feeling the collective energy, and so whatever tail end of that ketamine effects are, you just can stay inward with it. And I think even though people are inward during that point, there is the sense of this shared experience, and you're kind of in it together, even though everyone's having their own version of it. But yeah, and then we do a good amount of group process, before administering, and then to talk about it afterwards as well, when it's in a group. So it's a much longer experience. We schedule 2-hour appointments, which sometimes go a little bit longer for individuals, but for groups we schedule 4 hours, just because you just need more process around it, sharing as well. So
Beautiful. So it's and I'm sure that everybody listening will have kind of awareness of ketamine, but obviously it's kind of distinctive for much shorter kind of action time compared to other like psilocybins, like 6 hours, and ketamine is more like 1 hour. But it sounds like the group process is, yeah, that it becoming much more of a yeah, longer, deeper, more, I suppose, yeah,
Yeah, so I
fully,
guess to answer, I don't think it's any less deep. I just think like it's
yeah,
just longer at the end. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, amazing. And of course, ketamine is often used in a very kind of medical way with a clinic where it's given as an infusion without much
Without
therapy.
therapy, 60
Um,
minutes in and out the door. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, which always just amazes me that
Yeah.
that can happen. But it sounds like you're
Yeah.
really bringing your therapeutic training to create a really beautiful model with this. I feel like I want to come.
Yeah.
I want to come and experience it. It's
Yeah.
rare
Yeah.
to
Please
ketamine.
do. We'll do a provider one at some point. We have done provider like groups for all therapists too at times.
So,
I was
okay,
gonna say kind of along the lines of like paralleling the collective itself. We set up each group different for than the prior one, and so we don't come in with like a pitch, like a very set structure, or like retreats. You might have a like a specific ceremony or cosmology that it's coming from, and we really leave that to discuss with the groups what they want to kind of do and include in their process for setting up that group, and that could be so we can offer certain things like if people want to burn some sage or something, we're comfortable with that. If somebody in the group doesn't want that, then maybe we do that at the door when people come in and not in the group room. So really kind of trying to work with the preferences of each group. If people have really strong aversions to particular instruments or something, we might work with that in the music and try to avoid those. Or if yeah, if they want to, you know, share intentions and light a candle and have an altar where they place an object they brought with them. If the group wants to do that, we do. And if they don't, we don't. Or if somebody wants to just opt out of it, then they opt out of it. But so really are kind of like respecting the autonomy and not expecting people to lose themselves to the group. And I think that's an important balance that I think ideally the collective supports the full development of individuals rather than um, you know, turning them into some blend norm that we all aim for in the middle, which I think is what psychology does a lot of the time, right? We try to either
mhm.
medicate or therapize people towards some narrow norms that don't respect the diversity of what humans actually are. And so I think one of the ideas here is not making the collective the enemy of the individual, but they should work in tandem.
That's such an important balance because yeah, I suppose, and you've written beautifully and talked beautifully about the problems with individualism and neoliberalism and how this is, impacting on mental health crises, but also at the other end of the spectrum, you have the problems with groupthink and
Yeah.
cults.
Yeah.
And yeah, so losing yourself to that kind of, so yeah, finding ourselves somewhere that the individuality can be fully expressed but understood, understanding the impacts we have on other people. I so often think in ASA that what we haven't really learned in individualistic culture is fully understanding the impacts we have on other people. So being able to individuate and be who we are as individuals and find our kind of our calling and our purpose and who we are, but understand that that has an impact, and sometimes it has to be kind of moderated, and to be able to be flexible with that. It's like this is who I am, and sometimes that might need to be, yeah, kind of I might need to compromise a little in terms of other people are also themselves too. So it sounds like your groups are doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we can be prone, even on the political left, we're supposedly more open and interested in diversity to like uh, setting rigid rules, and I think you see that even like among some of the critics of psychedelic assisted therapy who are coming from a more of a left perspective, that they want to know like what are the rules, like never touch anyone. It's like so goddamn rigid, right? And it's like so in the group somebody might want their handheld and somebody might say don't touch me, and you just respect both of those people. Like neither one of those people gets to set the rule for the other person, and I think that's what gets lost is like we think we identify like good ideas and bad ideas, and makes us feel safe to set rigid rules around it when really everyone's different and they've all had different life experiences and have different needs. And
Mm.
um, just respecting the autonomy of individuals to kind of decide what their needs and their preferences are, what they want to participate in and not participate in. And
Mm.
And of course, there are wise ethical guidelines, but those tend to be they're guidelines. They're not laws that have no nuance or exception to them,
Mhm.
right?
Mm. And you're doing this in a real world place, one place where you're able to really see how this is affecting people, and I suppose how often they want to come back and things like that, and how they're integrating and what works for them integrating. So you're able to see, because I'm just thinking about all these guidelines that are kind of written in this kind of hypothetical way, because obviously psychedelics aren't legal in so many places, and ketamine being legal where you are and you being able to use that in a group therapy setting, it's kind of you're able to actually start understanding the reality, how it plays out and the different contextual factors and how it might need to be altered. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested in, yeah, how often when people are in a community of place like you're like Sana, how often are people choosing to come back to have psychedelic experiences versus integration? And how much integration do people tend to do? So, like, what kind of patterns are you seeing in people's usage over time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's worth pointing out we do a little bit less ketamine intensive model than so the pretty standard if you're looking at an IV like in just infusion only clinic is let's do 6 of them in 2 or 3 weeks, 6 ketamine experiences, and we don't like to do them more than once a week because we want time for an integration session in between and enough some time to process, and you may even do it slower than that depending on the person.
Mm.
Um, I think with depression, it's important to keep. It can be valuable to keep them a little bit closer together because the after the first few, the like any mood effects don't tend to last, and so usually you want to do those 1 week apart. But anybody else, I'm fine with it being a little bit more spread out. Uh, doesn't necessarily have to be once a week, but so probably our average person, I'd have to look at the number, is doing like 4 ketamine sessions with us total. And some of that's definitely financial, like they're in time and uh, taking time off work and spending money and all of that. So I'm sure if it was unrestricted, people would do. If there were no limitations like that, people would do more. But certainly, some people will just say like, "All right, I'm going to take what I got from this and go back to therapy or go see what I can do with this in my life," and maybe just do a little bit more integration work instead of more ketamine. And then other people who have the resources and the flexibility might do the larger number. They might, but it tends to slow down no matter what. Like, they might start doing it monthly or quarterly or something, or twice a year or something,
Mm.
where they just want it as a touchstone to kind of come back to reconnect to that work. Because there's the ideals of integration, there's the realities of integration, and that's that the world and the culture don't necessarily support the insights and the changes you're trying to make. Like sometimes you're swimming upstream, trying to bring some of these things into your life, um, and we have words like bypass, which I always think like don't recognize the constraints enough. That so bypass meaning you're not doing the work to kind of make the changes and um, work with the insights that you got from that psychedelic experience. But I think there are things that can get in the way of that, and so sometimes you do need to have another experience to reconnect with that. And it's not so simple as just the old saying of like when you get the message, hang up the phone, stop tripping.
Yeah.
Sometimes you forget the message, or you need to listen to that message again because it was a long, complicated one that's hard to follow.
Definitely. Well, next, you're going to be coming to our community to answer questions from the community about your work and about Sana. And I think in that conversation, we'll have a lot of questions for you about your integration practices that you offer people afterwards. So I know you have lots of really varied holistic practices. I know you have like a movement practitioner who's part of your collective. I thought that was amazing to see. And we will have so many questions for you about, yeah, how you integrate your approach in a community of place. Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating conversation, and as this one has also been. Thank you so much for telling us about your work and for doing that work.
Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to talking more.